All right, welcome to our Monday, February 24th work session. We will get started right away with the special session and have a roll call to determine the quorum.
Sure. Director Connor is absent. Director Cooney? Roll call. Director Cooney? Here. Director DeBeat?
Here.
LaRue?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Schneider? Here. Sure.
Present.
Quorum is present.
All right, I'll have you stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance All right, well, welcome our visitors and media representatives, and then move into the public hearing for the Muscatine Community School District for the proposed plan specifications, proposed form of contract, and the estimated cost of the Muscatine Community School District Central Improvement Plan. We'll need a motion to open the public hearing, and then we'll do a roll call vote.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
So, roll call. Director Cooney? Here. Director DeBeat?
Aye.
Director LaRue?
Here. Aye.
Director Phillips?
Aye.
Director Schneider?
Aye.
And Director Sure.
Aye.
Thank you.
Can I change mine to I instead of here?
Yeah. All right, we'll move into discussion and the oral and written comments, if any are received. We'll make a motion to close the public hearing,
I so move.
Second.
and then a roll call with aye to adjourn.
Aye.
So we can start with Cooney. Director Cooney?
Aye.
DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Sure.
Aye.
Okay. Next public hearing is for the Muscatine Community School District MHS tennis courts. Again, we'll need a motion to open that public hearing.
I make the motion to open the public hearing for the tennis courts.
Second.
Okay. We'll start again. Director Cooney?
Aye.
Director DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
And Sure.
Aye.
Discussion and oral and written comments.
We didn't receive any.
All right, we'll take a motion to close.
I so move.
Second.
Director Cooney?
Aye.
Director DeBeat?
Aye.
Director LaRue?
Aye.
Director Phillips?
Aye.
Director Schneider?
Aye.
And Director Sure.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item is then to approve that contract award recommendation for the Central Improvement Project. The amount of $2,494,730, and for any change orders over $25,000 to be approved by the board. Do we have a motion?
I make the motion to approve the central improvement project for $2,494,730, and any change order over $25,000 to be approved by the board. Second.
All right. We do have that.
Chris, you want to come up?
Any discussion?
I have a couple things, if I could, please. And it's just more as, I believe, probably some clarification from on here, because Russell has stated about not recommending acceptance of alternative 3 and 4 and 5. Would you be able to explain that out a little bit for us?
Yes. So are we talking about the alternates or the base bid?
It says the alternate.
Yeah, okay, so alternate 3 was?
The
yeah,
video
improvement.
projects, and then stage lighting upgrades and
Okay.
stage rigging.
Yep. So number 3 is a projection system that we'd have a screen and, a projection for that. The stage lighting alternate is to switch out all of the stage lighting from incandescent to LED, along with prop lighting, spotlights, those things. And then the last alternate, what was the last one, sorry?
Stage rigging.
Stage rigging. So there's some upgrades in the stage rigging that weren't part of the base bid. That's what that alternate was for that. Some more motorized things that go along with the rigging part, which was in the base bid.
So, but it's not a problem having it partly done and not the other part of it.
Correct, yeah. So when we met after we got the bids back, the biggest thing for us was how can we set this up knowing we can't necessarily pay for all of it at this point, to set it up to be able to do in stages at a later time. So with the base bid and the things we've selected out of that, it's going to be fairly easy to come back in later and do some of those alternate projects. All of the electrical, the controls for AV, the lighting controls will all be done in the base bid. So this was the easiest way to kind of make that work later down the line, knowing that we didn't have enough money to cover the whole thing.
So one of the examples too of just those conversations, we had also talked about not doing the balcony piece right away, but as that bid came in a little bit better and looking where, what things we could do, it's cheaper to do that balcony piece now so that helps with the painting. It helps because you have all the rigging set up. You've got everything kind of cleaned out and out of the way. So if we did that later, it would come at a much higher cost. So in looking at those other alternates, that's why we included that and not one of these other pieces.
So alternate 1 and 2 are included in the base bid then?
Correct. Yeah, alternate 1 was the painting of the entire venue, and then alternate 2 was replacing seating, carpeting in the balcony. Yep.
And depending on how things go with other projects, there could be some more money that we could possibly do 3, 4, or 5 in the future.
Right. Well, those are the alternates. Yes, we could come back to those. Yep.
My question from there has to do with, because you're indicating the theater, audio, and visual, so you're talking about the audio, meaning your sound system.
Right.
That was one of the big components that we first talked about in our team meeting.
Yeah.
Because I'll be real honest with you, the audio there is terrible. And the ability I know for different type of theater and different things over the years has gotten harder due to that factor on it. So that was one of the biggie areas that we were hoping that was able to be part of the original package.
Right.
And that was one that did come back significantly higher than what was originally anticipated. And a majority of that is just in the materials. The cost of those materials were significantly higher than, so, again, at that point, what we have done is gone back, having conversations with that theater consultant about kind of at a minimum what pieces. And again, all of the infrastructure will be in place for that. So that'll be easier to switch out at a later date, but what are the minimums to move forward?
So are these prioritized, is that the order, like we would try to do alternate 3 first, alternate 4 is just random? I'm just curious.
Well,
They're not
some
necessarily
of
in priority
yeah,
order, no.
not necessarily, yeah. And some of the base bid we're rejecting because of the cost of that, which is what Karen's referring to as the AV part. We only got one bidder on that. Almost every other area that we went out for bid for, we had 2, 3, 4, 5 sometime bidders, and we just got one for that and the rigging. And so when it came back, I think Russell was concerned with the company that bid time frame on finishing that. They didn't like the time frame, and they think that they probably indicated that in the price they gave. So I think it's something, again, we're going to be able to revisit either on our own or to possibly go put it back out for bid, knowing we could get, more than one person to bid on it.
Since this is a community uses this quite a bit, are we having any community donations or anything like that?
We are certainly going to accept them, and we've got some information that we'll be working to get out here this week related to the project and certainly open that up. We'll also be looking for grants for that as well.
I do know the grant category of things right now can be difficult on what is available to get. And some of it also depends on the time of the year that you try to get those grants, because there's only certain times that you're able to get them. I would like to go back to this is just my opinion, and just because I feel strongly enough about it, is because what we do have in here is you're indicating that's something we're going to be doing with seating itself, any of the seating.
Yeah.
Okay. I would actually feel more comfortable making sure that we had the proper sound system for those that are going to be using this, rather than worrying about the seating right now. But that's my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, no, we know the sound's an important part of this. I think some of the seating, when we tear that seating out, it's allowing a lot of that construction, painting, getting electrical run, where we can get lifts in there that reduce those costs significantly, because we can get a lift in there to do some of that and not have to put scaffolding in the entire auditorium. So that was certainly discussed, but again, I think what made the most sense for the scope of work in this initial part was to tear everything out, replace kind of, get it ready to go, and we can, get sound can go in fairly easy after the fact. Like I said, they're gonna kind of do the majority of that work with electrical and getting all of the controls and things done in the base bid. So we'll just basically got to go out, figure out what type of sound system will work the best in there and try to get a better price.
So is this with, doing the seating and everything and doing the major construction, and are we required by law to upgrade the ADA compliance and things like that? So that's part of that seating
Correct.
removal and have to make that ADA compliant, correct?
Yep, exactly.
And there's an elevator that goes up in there, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yep. We kept the elevator in there. We didn't tear that one down.
Does it still work?
It does, and that was part of the design and where the building came down. The other part of the building came down is to maintain that elevator.
Are there any concerns about lead-based paint that would be running into and painting, or the asbestos?
I don't think so. We actually had it tested, a lot of the portions of the auditorium again, just about a month ago, and everything came back negative in there. We're not doing as much, getting into the walls and tearing out some of those things but we checked a lot of the glue, things like that, the carpet glue, those things, the wall panel glue, those things all came back clean. So I think we're fairly confident we don't have any more issues with that, we hope. So.
So there is a chance, if that's a priority of the committee, that we could then return to the committee and say, here is a possible campaign that we could do to get that funding raised in the community. I mean, because I think Denny's right. If we looked at the usage of this, it is a community theater as well. So I think it would be appropriate on all accounts to ask for some help, because we want to be mindful of the dollars too. And
I'm looking forward to be able to see what we're able to come out with, some information, that's going to be able to help the general public understand that better. Because up until now, we haven't really articulated well to the public what are our concerns, what have we been doing there and that, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that I get questions, well, okay, you left it, but what are you doing with it and such. And so that if we approach this the right way, I think that it will be very helpful for us, for the community, to see what they might be able to do. But by doing that, we're going to be able to need a plan of action so that they understand what we plan on doing with it, who is going to be able to be a part of being able to usage of it, and or how much that is going to cost. accordingly, you know, to it, because we have not utilized, I think, that for a while. But, so we need to have some of those components figured out too, as we move forward.
Is there any more discussion on that one? We do have a motion and a second, so all in favor could say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign?
I kind of, aye.
Are you good?
I couldn't hear it. It cut my mic out and my hearing aid, so I
Okay.
apologize.
Was your aye in favor or opposed?
In favor.
Okay. All right. Next is for the contract award recommendations for construction of the Muscatine High School tennis courts in the amount of $1,082,755, and any change orders over $25,000 to be approved by the board. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract award recommendations for construction for the Muscatine CSD MHS tennis course improvement for the amount of $1,082,755, and any change orders over $25,000 to be approved by the board.
Second.
All right, still up there. Are there any questions or discussion on this?
I actually had somebody get a hold of me today for a couple questions on it. And I'm going to see if I've got it correctly from our conversation. When this was put out for it, it was something to do with then not be able to also use it for, like, say, pickleball?
So part of this project, I've been working with the United States Tennis Association with the help of a couple people in the community to receive a grant for this. They actually increased the amount of funding that they have available by like tenfold this year. So I've met with a couple representatives from the Tennis Association. We've kind of filled out the initial paperwork for that. So they're real specific, and if to redo courts, they want them done in a real specific way. The one thing that you have to have is you have to have a smaller court lined for youth to play tennis. It's just basically a smaller court, but it also says right in the grant, this is not for pickleball. There's be no lines for pickleball on these courts in order to be eligible for the grant. Why, I have no idea. But that grant can get us, you know, from the U.S. Tennis Association about $200,000, and then our Midwest agency is going to can give us another $10,000 to $20,000, so we can get up to $215,000, $220,000 for this. And I haven't heard back from the initial input that I've given them. It's kind of just them kind of vetting the whole project. I sent them all the documents, making sure it meets all of the standards that they have. But I think we get through that first part. They may say, hey, I need you to do this or this too with it, but we were fairly confident we're going to probably get that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And lighting's not a part of this yet. I'm working with Musco separately because, you know, the lights there are old and need to be upgraded as well. So, but I think, again, the timing of these things, remember when we put this out last fall, it came back at $1.6 million, and we had one bid. So we put it back out in January here, and it came back significantly lower, you know, just because timing sometimes is everything.
And I see that they're recommending not to do the alternative 1 and alternative 2 to tear out the existing course, so we just overlay.
Yeah.
And they're confident that that's going to take.
Yeah. So this system, this post-tension concrete is like top of the line. This is what most large schools go to now. The lifespan on it is significantly longer than asphalt. Asphalt is softer, tends to crack sooner. This basically they put tensions in the concrete and then they tighten it together. So anytime it cracks, the tensions will pull those cracks together. So it's supposed to last, you know, upwards of 30, 40 years when we use this. And the barrier in which they overlay it with, you know, this was the biggest question I had too with both the architects and the construction company. McConnell and Associates is kind of a top-of-the-line tennis company in the Midwest, so they do tennis courts all over the country, and we overlay them more than we dig them out just because it's such a cost savings. He's like, the barrier that they put in between it doesn't allow the post-tension concrete to shift at all if the ground does shift. Yeah.
And Chris, like based on this information, so shall we expect the tennis court to be ready by the fall semester?
Yeah, we're shooting for September 1st. You know, it's all new fencing, new lighting, courts. Yeah, we're going to shoot for September 1st. So as long as everything goes as planned, they didn't think they'd have a problem with that.
Thank you.
Oh, question, I suppose, back on the central, did they have an idea as to how much timing for that to complete?
Yeah, again, fall, September, October is what we're shooting for. So that would be wonderful if we can get that back open and usable before, you know, or sometime in the fall semester.
All right, thank you.
All right. There is a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right. For this portion of the evening, we will adjourn, so we will need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, moving into the work session portion of tonight, we do need to have another roll call to start that.
Just a roll call for directors who are present. So we'll start with Karen, Director Cooney,
Here.
Director DeBeat,
Here.
LaRue, Phillips,
Here.
Schneider. Here. Sure, and Director Connard is absent. Thank you, sorry.
Okay, next is the superintendent update.
Well, I will go quickly because I know Tom is raring to go. And that really, there's not a lot to update on the legislative end. We're just kind of continuing to hurry up and wait. They still have not decided on SSAs, and obviously Tom will talk about that a little bit. A couple of the pieces that I, did want to talk about. First was we had our district environment committee this past week. So as you know, we had those results back. We had some initial meetings with that group. Then they met at all of the buildings. And then they came back here representing each of the buildings. They shared out, here are some of the things, kind of individually for each building, some of the things that they're working on, and then they all talked about areas at the building levels that have been identified for the district. Then we take those and each, groups, there were several groups that worked on this, they kind of group some of those district comments together into themes. Then we share those themes out with the whole group, and then every person there, I think we had a little over 30 people, had 2 or 3 sticky dots, and they go up and identify what are the 2 or 3 top priorities that you'd like to focus on this year. If you remember last year, it was professional development, it was communication, and it was discipline and behavior. And so this year, a little bit different. The priorities that came out of that were collaboration, like time for collaboration, and that's teachers across the district and by grade level, and there's more we have to unpack with that, but that's the initial category. Recognition and celebration of staff and students was a part of that, and behavior again. So now that we've identified the themes, they're going to take those back to their building, kind of share that process, share those conversations, and then we'll come back and meet in March. And this year we'll meet in March, April, and May. Last year we skipped March because of spring break and just timing, but this year we'll try to get one in and get another meeting before the end of the school year. And so then we can really begin to dig into those topic areas and start developing action plans for improvement. So, questions about that?
Are there things that they noticed last year that you did in response to those three, that they were like, please continue doing them, this is why it's working?
I would say there was some comments like that, but I think what you notice is the shift of, there wasn't as much conversation around professional development and how that looks, right? The communication was still a topic, but it wasn't the priority topic, right? Now, some of the pieces in communication, celebration and recognition kind of fits into that, so it's kind of an offshoot of that at the same time. So again, I think what we're seeing is, again, it's a natural progression of, here's where we're at right now and the things we think from a district that can help us get better, and that's what we'll move forward with.
So with that, so in other words, we did professional development, so maybe they saw that was help taken care of so that it was able to go to that next step?
I think we've made some changes there. We're getting a lot of feedback every time there's professional development. One of the things from professional development they said is we want more time. So professional development isn't on there, but a component of it and what that looks like is there. So again, what you're seeing is generally some of the same overall themes, but more targeted into now kind of what is the next layer of that, I would guess you would say. So again, we'll spend a little more time digging into that. And then just the last piece I was going to mention is actually just going back to construction. And, I want to thank the board and the community. A lot of work has gone in. These are the last two major projects that we'll finish up under those bond components. So there's been a lot of great work happening with all of that. And so that's exciting. And we can remember as we, and Tom shares those with when you get your budgets on that monthly report, kind of where we're at in some of those save categories. But these will be effectively paid off in 5 years. And so, over these next few years, as these projects get finished up and we're, kind of settling into them, then we start, looking to the future. Ahead of the conversation on budget, here just a minute, I also want to, this is a good opportunity to remind people that the funds we use for these kinds of projects can't be used for staffing, they can't be used for salaries, right? They're dedicated just to facilities and infrastructure, which is how we're using them. So just a good reminder of that is, when they see us approving, these large-scale projects, they can't be used for anything else. Okay. Any other questions for me? And now the moment you've all been waiting for.
Okay. All right, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for having me here tonight. So we're going to get started on the budget presentation, and at your board table, I did give you this little handout. It's very handy to have. On the front there is the different revenue, or the different funds, and where that revenue, how it's generated, and then what the appropriate legal uses are for those funds. And then on the back, there's some key finance basics, key terminology that you don't hear every day that would be a good reference. And then the top left is the general fund, how, I'm going to talk about it here later, about the uniform levy and how the general fund levy is determined and so forth. So keep that handy, refer to it tonight or whenever you want to. It's also on our district website under the finance department, so we can find it there also. So tonight we're going to be talking about the certified budget, which is a document that shows the amount of taxes that we're going to levy for each fund and or program and the aggregate revenue and expenditures. So this report gets certified to the county auditor by April 30th for the upcoming fiscal year. And remember, we have to hold 2 public hearings now. So, and then it is approved by the board of directors. So this is our timeline. You can see here on March 5th, we have to submit our maximum property tax levy to the county auditor, because on March 15th, the county auditor will mail those proposed property tax statements to residents. So if you remember this from last year, every taxpayer in the county or in the school district gets a taxpayer statement, and we have to hold our public hearing on that, and that is scheduled for March 24th. It's a Monday, 5 o'clock, and we'll publish that notice in the paper sometime between March 4th and 14th, and then we'll have that hearing, and that's all we can have on the agenda. It can't be part of a regular board meeting. If it is, it has to be a separate meeting, according to the law. And so we're just going to have it on that Monday, special meeting. And then April 14th, so that's our regular second Monday board meeting in April, we'll have our budget adoption, public hearing, and adopt the budget. So we'll publish that in the paper sometime between March 25th and April 4th. Of course, that deadline, as I said, is April 30th. We'll get everything submitted to the county auditor after it gets approved, and then sometime in May, June, we do get preliminary tax rates released by the Department of Management for any final adjustments. So pending legislation. So this is always a fun time because state cost per pupil has not been determined yet, but yet we're going to be here. We have to set our budgets, our property tax rates for next year. So that supplemental state aid has to be set in section 2 on our documents. That's where that goes into to finish or to calculate our aid and levy. Then our district cost per pupil has to be determined. Any transportation equity, that's in the House side of, the Senate had something, then the House had their version. There was transportation equity built into that, which just means it doesn't really affect Muscatine because our transportation cost per pupil is below state average. It only affects this, depending on where they set it, if you're above state average. But nonetheless, that's still outstanding. So the property tax replacement, there is a push for property tax relief across the state of Iowa using, I believe that SAVE money is used in that. So that a lot of times that is not determined until all districts submit their their budgets, and then it's determined how it gets distributed. So AEA funding, of course, is still, there's always that amount that they reduce, so that's still in limbo. Instructional support state aid, there is a state aid piece to instructional support levy, and I'll talk about that on a later slide, but that is something that likely won't happen, but again, I'll explain that in a later slide. So this next slide is just a little history of state supplemental aid, formerly known as allowable growth years ago. And this goes back, I believe, to 2007-8 in the days of 4% SSA. You can see it was 0 there. We use 2% in our budget projections, I guess. Based on what it's been the last few years, it seems like a good SSA to use in our projections. Well, when we are doing our projections, we have to look at our property tax rate, our projected unspent authorized budget in the general fund. If you remember, in Iowa, the general fund has the concept of spending authority, not necessarily cash, and I'll be going over that in a future slide here. And then what the state supplementary assistance rate is. So this chart, as I said, shows the history. The state cost per pupil in FY25 is $7,826. So we're kind of just waiting on setting SSA for next year. So I think the deadline might be passed for when that's supposed to be done, but I'm not 100% sure, so yeah, okay. So the other piece of our general fund funding is obviously enrollment. And so this slide talks about budget enrollment and enrollment served. So I think it's important for us to make sure we understand the difference between the two, because when you hear the term certified budget or budget enrollment, that's the number of resident students that we count every year. Enrollment served takes into account the enrollment that either comes into our district from other districts or leaves, or of course, people included in our budget enrollment go to other districts, so we don't count them in enrollment served. And that's a net of in the fall of 2024, we were minus 212. So I don't think it's uncommon that this is something we're aware of, that we have more open enrollment out than what comes in. So, of course, when we're doing projections, that's a big piece of projections is our enrollment. Typically, I use losing about 75 kids a year. Now, eventually, that number is going to level out. We're not going to keep losing students down to zero. That's just not going to happen. But, we haven't leveled out in the last, probably, 10 years or so. In October of 2013, fiscal 15, we were at 5,344 budget enrollment. October of 24, we're at 4,315, so we've lost about 1,029 students since 2013, so 19%. As I said, budget enrollment is the enrollment of resident students living in the district. Enrollment served are those students that are attending classes in our district. And there is what's called weighted enrollment, so there are some certain categories that students are weighted above 1.0, such as special education or English language learners. So, okay. This financial indicator, something you've seen before, it's our unspent budget authority. This is funded by property taxes and state aid. Spending authority gives us access to spend even though we don't get cash behind it. And you may be thinking, that is crazy. Well, in Iowa, that is something that we have to be cognizant of because, not everyone pays property taxes or pays them on time. There are things such as across-the-board cuts that we've received in the past. Hasn't happened in many years. 2011 would be the last time schools got a across-the-board cut. But there's also, we get reduced cash from the state for students that are in juvenile homes that don't have a resident district, and then every school in Iowa has to proportionately pay for those students. So, for Muscatine, that amounted to just under $100,000 in cash that we paid. And so we still have the authority to spend that $100,000, but the cash we don't have the cash. So if you can kind of see here, cash reserves play an important role in our general fund. I'm not used to talking this much, so I'm going to take a water here. Okay. So another financial indicator, an important one, and that is our solvency ratio. Remember, this is a snapshot, point-in-time measure of revenue remaining, assuming, we would close our doors as of June 30th of the fiscal year. And that's after gathering all the year's revenues and paying all the year's obligations. It's calculated taking, our fund balance on our balance sheet, our unassigned fund balance, and divided by our general fund revenues. While it is an important measure from a cash flow perspective, and maybe important rating to, let's just say, a bond rating company or something, that's an important ratio. It's really not a measure used by the state to determine our general fund health. And that is our UAB is what determines, like, if we were going negative spending authority, that would be a major issue versus, you know, having a positive fund balance or a solvency ratio, because it's against the law to be negative spending authority. You get warned from the Department of Ed if you're trending down, so I've heard, but that is not a measure that the department or the Department of Ed has. But it's interesting though, in our audited financial reports, there's not the concept of spending authority in there. There's a blurb in it, but it really means nothing to anybody except you guys here in this that serve on school boards in Iowa. So our solvency ratio can be impacted by our cash reserve levy, if we have one or don't have one. It can be impacted by underfunding of the state aid, basically across the board cuts, as I said, reductions in cash. It can be affected by delinquent property tax or appeals, and then expenditure reductions. I mean, that is a way to help your solvency ratios, reduce your expenditures. So we want to be in that 5 to 15% range. The state average in FY24 was 20.3%. So you can see we're probably below state average. We're in okay, you know, no, to me, we're at the high end of the 5 to 15%. So we just need to make sure we're continuing to monitor that. So this next slide is a projection of, and a history of our property valuations. Property value is one of the key components impacting our levy rate. There's the property tax that we calculate for the general fund, or the valuation. There's two separate valuations. One calculates it for our general fund, and then you have to include that TIF. You know, I think most of you have heard about TIF or understand what TIF is, but TIF is excluded when we calculate the general fund rate, and then it is included when we calculate voter PEPL, board PEPL, and instructional support levy. Why? Don't ask me that. I won't be able to answer, but that's just the way it works. So for 2026, so for next year, the property valuations did increase by 4%, or just over $60 million. So I think the question came to me about, well, isn't the statewide, I thought the maximum was 3%, and that is true statewide. So on a statewide level, property valuations can't go over 3%. So I guess you might want to say in different taxing authorities, it went up higher, some lower. So that's how that worked out to be 4% for Muscatine next year. Okay, we've seen this before, this property tax rate comparison. This is comparing the current year that we're in with the proposed levies for next year. So this breaks down each piece of our overall levy. The general fund, the management fund, and the physical plant and equipment levy fund. Remember, we have no debt service fund because although we do show money in our debt service fund, that's not from property taxes. That is from sales tax revenue. We don't have general obligation debt. If we had general obligation debt, we would have a debt service levy. But our debt is paid for from sales tax revenue. And so the items in purple are basically yet to be determined. You know, the budget guarantee line 4.8, this current year was $665,000. If we get, and this is based on 2% SSA, it would be, $505,000. Now, if SSA ends up being higher, then that number would go down, okay? And then our cash reserve levy is proposed to be a 1.5 million. And we did go a few years back, we could not do cash reserve. The state puts a limit on, the state puts a limit, and we are below that limit, so we can have a cash reserve levy. Sorry. Just going out of here. All right. The items in purple, I went over that all right. If SSA was 3.6%, we would not be on budget guarantee. So if you go back a few slides to see what the history of SSA is, chances of it being above 2, 2.25 are, I don't think we'll get to the 3.6. But that's what it would need to be in order to reduce our property tax rate. So there is a slide about budget guarantee later that I'll comment more on that concept. So looking further, let's see, I talked about the cash reserve, the management fund. So it's been a practice to have our management fund cash flow, meaning that we want to be able to have enough cash to pay our bills in the management fund come July 1st. So it's projected, that reserve has been going down the last few years, and it's projected that we'll just have over 7 months worth of reserve at the end of FY25. So we are proposing to move our management fund levy to $2,500,000, and I think it's been mentioned about what comes out of the management fund, and obviously early retirement does, although that's not the biggest expense, and that's sorry, I'm trying to find my paper, and would you know, that's going to be the one piece of paper that I left. Nope, here it is. Okay. So the biggest expenditures out of our management fund are property casualty insurance. So we also, EMC put a wind hail deductible on our policies too, which increased the management fund requirements last year. And of course, we had our property tax rate set before we even knew what our renewal was last year. So anyway, that's the proposed management fund levy. Obviously, while our overall rate has been increasing the last 2 years, and I have a history slide here, and I'll show you that, but our general fund has been declining. Makes sense. Declining enrollment, low SSA, you would expect the general fund to be going down. And so it's our management fund that has significantly influenced our rate. So the next few slides are going to break down those levies. So the uniform levy, if you go back to this little handout right here on the back here, there's 3 scenarios: a property poor district, an average, and a property rich district. So we're probably right in the middle somewhere, maybe towards the lower side. But if you look at the uniform levy in a property poor district, that levy rate only can generate $880. In a property rich district, that levy rate can generate over $6,000. So then your additional levy, so then the state covers up to 88.4% of the cost per pupil, and then you have that additional levy, and then there's that property tax replacement. So that's kind of how, if you go back to the slide here, the uniform levy rate, it's that 540 plus the additional levy. it has taken a little uptick in FY '25. It's going to go down in FY '26, and the projection is to go down. So the cash reserve levy, kind of, this next year is projected to go, we're proposing to go up, but again, that's something we have to look at year by year, you know, depending on how special ed ends up, those areas where, you know, I come to you in the fall, and we talk about, well, how did special ed end up, or how did our LEP end up? And so when we ask for that additional authority, we're using our cash reserves to pay for that, because we don't get funding for 100% of our special ed costs or LEP costs. The instructional support levy, remember, this is either a board-approved 5-year levy or a voter-approved 10-year instructional support levy. We currently operate under a 5-year board-approved levy, and I believe that might expire in around 2028, so we'll be coming to you in the next year or two to renew that. But when you talk about instructional support levy, it's an option of utilizing, it's that 10% of our regular program district cost. So if you think about the formula, students times the cost per student equals regular program district cost. And then 10% of that can be generated for additional general fund revenue to be used for whatever purpose is in the instructional support that we pass. And in Muscatine, it's for any general fund purpose. Now, I'm sorry to say that 10% doesn't really mean 10%, because there is a state aid component of instructional support that has not been funded by the state for many, many years. Although it's still in legislation, it always shows up. At one time, the state cut off how much they were going to pay for instructional support levy state aid, and they kept it at a flat dollar amount, and then that was divided up. Whatever school district had an instructional support levy, it was divided up proportionately. Well, that number just stopped, and it's no longer, it always ends up being taken off at the end of the legislative session, so we won't get that state aid portion no matter what it is. So technically, we have a shortfall of that, so I can't, so I guess my point is stressing that, you know, it's supposed to be 10%, but it's really more like 7% because of the state shortfall. And we're not allowed to, like, cash reserve or anything, that the difference that the, excuse me, that the state doesn't make up. So, you know, even though there's a shortfall of about $1.1 million there for Muscatine schools, so. But anyway, that's in our resolution, we have to have at least 1% income surtax and then property tax. So next year, we're proposing moving that from 1% to 2% so that it helps with that. So the more you put on the income surtax, the lower your property tax rate is going to be, if that makes sense. The management fund levy is next, and, oh yeah, I sure do. I will click. There we go. There's cash reserve. Oh, we already talked about cash reserve. We talked about that. I'm sorry. Management fund levy. So this is just a history of the management fund levy, and I believe for at least a couple years, keeping it at that 2.5 million level, and we'll eventually be able to not levy as much, but I think it's just important to monitor that to make sure we have that cash available to pay those management fund expenditures. And then this physical plant and equipment levy, this is, obviously this is for revenue that goes into our pot of capital projects money between physical plant and equipment and SAVE, the sales tax. But there are two components of the physical plant and equipment levy. There's the board-approved 33-cent levy. So by board action, we've proposed this every year. The board's approved it. And then there's also the $1.34 voter-approved PEPL. And so that was approved by the voters of Muscatine School District a few years ago to go through, I believe it's 2030 is when that expires. And every month you see when those expirations are for the ISL and PEPL, and coming up, not today, but on another date, I will kind of put out there when I think the board should consider renewing those two, because you don't want to like forget about them, especially the voter approved, because you're really limited anymore on when you can have special elections. So the next slide is going to be about our total property tax rate, and then what estimated future rates for the next 4 years are. So this goes back to about 2014. So while the district strives to keep our property tax rate as stable as possible, that there's factors beyond our control of the district. So 2.5% of SSA puts us on the budget guarantee, which is about 43 cents per thousand. So I think it's important to understand that the difference between assessed value and taxable value. In a future slide, I'll show you the different, or what I'm talking about with that. Assessed value, let's see, and taxable value is the value that is multiplied by the tax rate to generate the taxes owed, and it's always equal to or less than the assessed value due to credits and rollback. So you can see there, several years ago we were up in the high 14s, 15s, and then our tax rate was going down, and so this year we're proposing that increase to $13.92. And again, that could change somewhat before we're said and done here. So budget guarantee is the next slide. So the budget guarantee, or commonly known as the regular program budget adjustment, is one of a long line of mechanisms put into the finance formula to offset or delay the impact of declining enrollment. Obviously, Muscatine, we experienced that, and it's a year-to-year calculation, which effectively says, does the combination of SSA and our district's enrollment produce an increase in the regular program budget of at least 1%? So if not, the state gives the district the spending authority to get a 1% growth in the upcoming school year. The spending authority is added solely to the additional property tax levy, and there's no state aid, it's all property tax. It is funded by property tax as approved by the Board of Education, that's an Iowa Code 257.14. It's important to remember that because of our declining enrollment and the state setting SSA at 2% or even at 2.25, it does not mean that we will get any new money. So you might hear the concept of new money. The question, remember the equation, the number of students times the district cost per pupil equals regular program district cost. So schools that are guaranteed 100% of the prior year. So in this case up here, I didn't put the percentage, but I might have put this in another document that I didn't print out, but 2% SSA basically gives Muscatine schools 0.1% what's called new money, okay? So a lot of times, schools, districts like to look at new money, and, you know, in our situation, like it would take, I think I plugged in 6% or something like that to get any sort of, you know, new money next year. So that's why we're always continuing to look at our budget and how are we going to make next year work and so forth, so. Okay, so here's the resolution that's going to be on the agenda in March. The board has to approve this by April 30th, but I always put it on the March agenda. Even if we don't need to have it, which a couple years ago we didn't need it, but we still approved this resolution. I just want to make sure we don't ever forget to do that, because that's some spending authority that we would not be granted. This next slide is a summary of our total expenditures. So it's the actual for FY24, re-estimated for 25, and then projections for 26. So the top part is by fund, and so you can see there in the general activity management, SAVE, PEPAL, debt. Again, that debt service is transferred from the SAVE fund, and then food service. And so while our overall, over the last 3 years, our general fund expenditures are going down, obviously SAVE expenditures are going to go down too because of, you know, the bond issue that, or the sales tax revenue bonds. And then the bottom part is expenditures by those functional categories that, you know, we'll set those and then we'll monitor that, and then those are our expenditure limits unless we do a budget amendment. So the next slide is our taxpayer statement that's going to go to the county auditor. It's going to have things on there such as our meeting information, our current property tax levy, our current tax rate. It has what is called an effective tax rate, and that is the rate proposed by holding our current taxation constant while using next fiscal year valuations. Why, I do not know, but that's what is on this tax statement. As well as the proposed property tax levy, the proposed tax rate, and the reason for the increase. So I did highlight the reason for the increase there. I want to make sure, you know, declining enrollment means we're on budget guarantee, and that's all property tax. Property casualty insurance anticipated increase affect the management fund, and that's all property tax. And then levying cash reserves to fund special ed and English learner costs that are not funded by the state. And we'll have it on March 24th, 5 o'clock in this building, but it's strictly that public hearing. If you remember last year, we had a few people come in. I think it's very confusing for the public. You know, the taxpayer statement that the public gets has school, city, county, and I think the school might even be the first one on there. So, you know, there was never any guidance on whose responsibility it is to make a taxpayer understand this statement. So I know we had people come, we had people talk, we had people that came that didn't say anything because I think there was maybe confusion as to what this really is. So unfortunately, the next slide has the rollback example. Oh, dang it, here I go again. All right, this slide. So the example that shows up on the comparison that the taxpayer gets, the comparison on the Department of Management budget system for the taxpayer notices mandates a 10% increase in assessed value for both types of property, so commercial and residential. Is that realistic? I'm not sure if that is realistic or not. If I go back into history for Muscatine, I don't know that we ever reached that 10%, but nonetheless, that's in the example. So it's going to show that for the school's proposed tax rate increase, $100,000 property last year, $110,000 this coming year, the rollback is going to change. It's going to show a 15.9% increase in taxes. If you would hold the assessed value the same, and my understanding is odd-numbered years are the assessment years, so 2024 for 2026 is generally not changing. It'll change some, but not, whether it's 10% or not. But you can see that 5.4% is more realistic for our proposed property tax rate change. Now, I might say, do you have any questions on this? But I don't know if I'll be able to answer them. So I think it's more of an awareness than not much we can do about what goes out on this property tax statement. And the next slide is the commercial property example. So again, I think, oh, dang it, the next slide here. So I think I don't know what the right word is, but it's very overwhelming. And for me, and maybe for you, and for the average taxpayer, I think it's just confusing. So we'll do our best to explain what's going on. So. All right, so considerations for FY26, so we're trying to avoid any additional costs for the remainder of FY25. I have an estimated general fund budget of $62 million. I think that's overstated, but yet, we never know exactly where we're going to end up. But as we get closer to the end, we get a better picture. We want to realize some more cost reductions through attrition, something we've always done every year, taking a look at staff that leave. Do we have to replace them? We need to identify about $1.5 million of general fund expenditure reductions in full or part for next year. And it's a continuous process. I mean, we've already started that basically with staffing, and we'll continue to do that all the way through the fall. And we'll look at a lot of different things. Obviously, staffing is 80% of our salary and benefit, or is 82% of our general fund expenditures. So, evaluate any new funding flexibility opportunities. So there are things that have changed with categorical funding that allows schools to be more flexible if there's a carryover. So we're going to take a look at those to see how that can help for next year and going beyond. So this concludes our discussion on next year's budget. At this time, you can ask questions. I will do my best to answer if I can. I certainly will reach out to you tomorrow. My contact information is there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to sit down and talk with anybody about the budget or listen. So, yeah.
I do have one. It's actually back on page 10, because when you were mentioning about 7 months of reserve, so
Yep.
we want more than that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
7 months is
So
not a normal
ideally,
amount?
right, ideally, having 12 months of reserve there, because we're going to pay all of our management fund expenditures in July, except for 3/4 of our early retirement. The first quarter's early retirement is paid in July, and then we pay quarterly in calendar quarters, so July, October, January, March, okay? That's when early retirement, and otherwise, everything else is pretty much paid up front. work comp company that we switched to this last year allowed us to pay in installments. Sometimes I don't like doing that because then they charge a fee to pay in installments, but this company did not, so, but we did pay that by now. We've paid that by, what is this, February, so yeah, that's what that means.
Okay.
And we have options with, with our high deductibles that we're starting to get for property casualty. It is an, excuse me, it is an option to pay those out of the management fund. But right now, we don't have the reserve to do that. And so we paid $158,000 to buy down our deductibles. So we just need to have options that aren't basically paying more premiums for a potential loss that may or may not happen.
Tom, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for the amazing information that you shared with us tonight. And I know we are fiscally responsible as a school district here, but also, when you see what's going on, that makes us worried too, because again, when you talk about the SSA 2%, but in reality, what comes to the district is around 1%. And also with the property tax replacement, and the mood statewide is that they want to reduce the property tax. Those are two major revenue for any school district. So when this is going down, that's gonna leave us with almost bare minimum as school district. And I don't mean just Muscatine School District, but all over the state of Iowa. So this is something that is, something that worries
Yeah, we have to
most
keep it-
probably
we
all
have
of
to keep-
us here
Yep.
as a school board members. And most probably we need to always keep looking at the budget and find out ways, but that's the first question. The second, or comment, I'm sorry. But the question that I have with the chart that you provide us with, with the property taxes, it goes into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different accounts, right?
Are you talking about this page? Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
if you go and
So
look at the
property taxes-
it goes into 6 different funds. Right.
So it's gonna go into the general fund.
Yeah.
It's gonna go into PEPAL and management fund.
Yeah, but like, how do we do they tell us, like, okay, this percentage needs to go to general fund, or do we as a district decide on that?
We know that when we get the property tax revenue. As far as, I would have to go back to, I don't know if what is on a taxpayer's statement, whether it's broken down by general, PEPAL, or management. I've looked before, but to be honest, I don't know that off the top of my head. But we know as a district, when we get our money from the county treasurer, we know what fund it goes into, because they'll know the rates. This is the rate for the general fund, PEPAL, and management.
So they will let us know?
They know, and they would let, as a taxpayer, you would know, but again, I don't know, I forget how that is seen on your tax statement.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Lindsay, any questions?
I do have questions. Now I'm caught off guard. No. Well, I am. I'm trying to act like I know how to do math, but, all right. So I heard you say that we're also increasing the income surtax
Yep,
from 1 to 2%.
yes.
Right? So that will feed
So-
PEPAL more?
Sorry, what?
That'll feed the PEPAL fund more?
No,
Is that-
the income surtax is strictly a general fund, has to do with the instructional support levy. So let me go back to this document right here. Oops. Okay, let me go back to this guy. So this is, so the amount of revenue that the income surtax is being generated is not on here because it's not property tax. But it is, that instructional support levy is $1.10, $1.10464, that generates the $1,822,000 in property tax for next year. So instead of, so what's not on here is the district paid, I do have that information, believe it or not. So the income surtax is based on the state tax liability for Muscatine Community School District residents, and that was around, let's see. Okay, district income tax paid history in FY '20 is 30.2 million. FY '24 was 33.9 million. So you would get, so in FY '24, the income surtax rate was 1%, so we got 1% of that. So instead of, so that's funding that instructional support levy, which is actually the property tax piece plus the income surtax piece, which is, the income surtax piece is not on here. It's just the rate is on there, okay? So what the income surtax does is it lowers the property tax, and then we get more from the income surtax.
Okay.
Okay, if we kept the income surtax the same at 1%, then the property tax rate would go up by another, I don't even, probably closer to that $1.28 for the year, that was the year before. See that?
Yes.
Okay?
So I'm less confused if it's all going into our general fund.
Yeah,
for
it's
the
all going into the
instruction,
general
'cause
fund because,
one of these little roads goes to Pepple,
Yep.
so I'm like,
because
were we not
you
good at that?
could,
I thought we did okay.
you could fund the voter PEPAL with income surtax also, but
Okay.
Muscatine Schools does not, because it wasn't part of our resolution way back when we had the voter PEPAL
Perfect.
passed.
Okay,
It can be, but it is not.
that is,
And that's why you see the little
Exactly what my
line there.
question
That's very good observation, Lindsay.
made me a little nervous for a minute.
No,
Okay, so then my next question, so we're at 7 months right now in the management fund reserves, right?
right,
And we comfortably would like to be at 12.
yeah.
Does that $1
So
million get us
with
there?
the 2.5 million, the projection at the end of FY '26 would be at 0.8, so 8 months.
Okay,
So we would not be there, but here's the but is we have to go based on, we have to do our projections based on what EMC is telling us is our renewals for property casualty. They've given us that, but it's not solid yet, and we're also going out to the market for property casualty insurance too. So it could come in less. I don't know how much significantly less, but we could be better than that 0.8 by the end of FY '26, okay?
I have another one too.
Okay,
Okay, so they do say come in high, right, when we're sending this notice out, but we can always lower.
yep,
So if they come back and say 2.25,
yep,
which we're crossing our fingers and hoping.
yeah.
So what does that do to our request to you? Because looking forward, I
so-
see next year you have 1365, which I understand is the projection. If we go up this year and then down next year, and
So I did write that down, and the question is gonna be, where did I jot that note down? It's gonna be the next.
It's not very much, though, is that?
Yeah,
It impacts, I know it will reduce that budget guarantee number, so right now it's
Okay.
505,000. So if they up that to 2.25, that would reduce the amount of budget guarantee we have.
I found it.
Was it 3
It's,
cents?
with all else being the same, 2% income surtax and 2.25% SSA, our rate would be around 1387. So it would go down about 5 cents. Still be on budget guarantee, but that would be less. The budget guarantee would be less, okay?
So I got a question here.
Sure.
With the federal funds, how are they dispersed? Do we get those from the government, or does that
So-
go to state first and then come
Okay,
to us?
so the way federal funds work is it comes to us through the Iowa Department, the Department of Education. But like, the federal funds go to the Department of Ed, and then the Department of Ed gives it to all the LEAs, all the districts in Iowa, okay?
So
Yep.
how much, I see it goes to the general fund and to the food and nutritional service.
Right.
About how much do we get from that?
Yeah, great question. Hang on a second, because I'm sure you have our audit report very handy, and it would probably be on that. Look it up here. So for the general fund, our federal revenue is our federal revenue this year is $2.5 million for all of our federal revenue. Most of that comes through the Department of Education.
Okay.
And that's completely an unknown right now as far as
Right,
how
right. What
next
I'm
year is
saying
gonna
is-
work, how it's gonna look.
If
Worse.
they cut the Department of Ed
Yeah,
at the federal government,
great.
they say we're
That
wiping
is-
that out, that's gonna significantly impact our.
yeah,
our
it
budget.
will. Mm-hmm. And right now, that is a big
If.
unknown.
Especially since it says for food and nutrition
Well,
fund too. on
that
there.
piece does not come through the well, I don't know, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure how that's gonna work as far as the nutrition side of claims and such. I mean,
Doesn't that come through the Department of Agriculture?
yeah, I can't quote me on that. I know we get it, and I know Alicia applies for that, or Alicia and her department make those claims every month. And yes, it is significantly more than the general fund. It's more like around 6 million, isn't it? So that, between now, that's hard telling, because we have, we have 14 Title I teachers on our staff. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying anything that's, we were discussing it today, so.
That, a lot of that money go Title I, Title II, and Title III, correct?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of staff on Title II and III. Title III, we don't. Title II, yes, but we would have those staff anyway. We use Title II for class size reduction in Muscatine, so. Yeah.
Tom, unless somebody else have a question, I have also one more question.
Okay.
Let's assume the state decided that they want to reduce also property taxes. And we are proposing, let's say, as local here, a tax rate increase. Can we do that?
I'm sorry, will you repeat your question? Let's suppose what?
If the state decided that property taxes must go down
Okay.
for the whole state of Iowa, as school district, what would be our alternatives, or can you go against that?
Do you know something I don't know?
No,
Because that would be
I'm
interesting.
asking, this is
No,
a
I
genuine
don't- I don't-
question.
I-
The reason why I'm asking, because
I don't know, I've not heard of this, if there is a mandate that our property tax rate has to go down. I mean, they would do things on the state side to reduce property taxes. Like after we all certify, after every school district certifies their budget and submit it to the Department of Management, then they go in at the state level and determine districts that have the highest property taxes, if they're gonna use some property tax equity relief fund money, which is basically sales tax revenue, to reduce that happens, then that could still happen.
It could happen, okay.
Yes, that very well could happen. Sorry, I didn't mean to like raise a red flag or anything, but
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
yeah, no problem.
And I just have more of an observation, because knowing how much, again, thank you for everything you've told us tonight, but then we have to realize as a, not only school district, but a city and a county, because city and county must have to be going through the same question and determinations from their end, too.
I mean, cities and counties are, I believe, I'm not sure how they operate with their tax rate and everything. I mean, I don't, so yeah, they're going through the same thing as far as setting this, getting it to the county auditor by March, what did I say, 4th? Yeah, they're going through the same, they have to have it submitted by 4 o'clock on March 4th, too. Because that was what we've been instructed. So. March 5th, sorry.
And I would
for
just
five,
add,
yeah.
again, at 2% across the state, we know there's about 160 districts who will be on budget guarantee, and we are one of them, which I think is about, it's over 50%, it's almost 60% of districts, because we have declining enrollment across the state of Iowa, right? That impact. So if there was a push from the state to reduce property tax burden, increasing SSA is a way to do it, right? I don't know that it'll, again, when you look at the trend history, they're probably not going to do that. Also, as you look at this tax rate comparison, when you look at the impacts, the budget guarantee is 32 cents of that property tax, right? If we weren't on budget guarantee, that lowers that tax rate. You know, the other one that's taken a big jump is that management fund, but that's coming out of that property casualty, which across Iowa is hitting everyone, right? As a board, you don't have a lot of flexibility on what, you know, where we add some of those, you know, dollars to. Management fund is one of them, but also, you know, and Tom's approach is really good there. We're at 7 months, we're adding to get us to 8 months. It's still not really where we want to be as a benchmark, but it's moving us in the right direction, but it's keeping that property tax in mind. And then if you know, when you look back at that trend history, and Tom and I talked about that, you go back to 2014, we were over 15 cents per thousand, right? So we're still, yes, we're going up, but if you look really where we've been long-term, we're still significantly down from where we were. You know, the hard part is it's hard to hold it exactly steady. But if somebody had held it exactly steady in 2014, we'd be at 15 plus, right? So there's advantages to, everyone loves to go down. Nobody likes to go back up, but sometimes, you know, we have to do those things. So it's good to see that kind of whole perspective there.
I think the question that comes to mind when you read that statement on the bottom of that card and why, it makes no sense. It is like a foreign language to a lot of people, I think. And so, because they don't have these handy sheets, but it is on our website and all of that. But I think the important part is, because what they want to say is, well, why didn't you budget better? Fix your spending. If you need more money, just spend your money differently, right? But I think you had your budgeted expenditures on here, and there's over $19 million of decreased expenses. Not all of that is coming from property taxes, but I think we can look at a lot of changes across the district too, and so maybe finding a way to share that and then talk about how we continue to adjust to so that we're not so reliant on budget guarantees and all of those things because of declining enrollment. We are making adjustments. I think that would just go a long way and be a little bit easier to understand. I'm not suggesting you write it on the card, but I just, as we have those conversations.
But, and you're talking about this
Yes.
document that goes out to taxpayers. Yeah, it's difficult to, because we're required to explain why our property taxes, not the tax rate, but the property tax asking is going up. And that's what we're required to put on this property tax statement. So I would be open to other verbiage, you know. Like you said, it is confusing, it is hard, but there's no one, you know, if our property tax asking wasn't going up, we wouldn't have to put anything there, but but
the
just
worst
in
critic. I have
general,
no
we've
suggestions, just-
we've had our property tax rate go down, but our property taxes that we're asking for goes up. And that's because of property valuations, so, you know, we don't have control over that either.
Right.
So,
And again, on that next slide, with budget expenditures, the general fund is going down. That's a smaller number,
Right.
right? So all of that, there's less spending. And
yeah, we take a lot more into account here versus property tax. There's also all of our resources, so.
And we are a people business, right? That's how we operate. And
Gets-
that's where it gets tough.
Okay,
Are there any other questions for Tom?
thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We do have, we'll move on to the next item then. So we do have a second reading on the policy for employee use of cell phones. If there's any discussion on that. All right, and then move into announcements. March 4th, we have the Riverbend Food Pantry. Again, I saw that they are looking for volunteers, so that should be posted. March 10th, community conversations, followed by the regular school board meeting at 6:15. Are there any other announcements? All right, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, we're adjourned.